Hello, and welcome back to another episode of TokyoPM. So today I want to talk to you about perfectionism. And perfectionism is something that I personally struggle with. And so I'm going to explain to you three ways where you can battle perfectionism, both in your work and in your personal life. A little bit more about my struggle with perfectionism. When I was in university, or even all the way back into high school, what would happen is if I have a really big task, then I would imagine like, oh, this is the perfect version of this. So for example, if I had to write an essay such as my thesis, I would think, okay, this is what the thesis is going to be like. This is kind of the idea, and it's going to be great. It's going to be like perfect. And the issue with visualizing your product in that way is you then also tell yourself it'll never be as good as I want it to. And so then you end up juggling two things. You think, okay, I want to make this product or this task or this essay or whatever you need to produce. And so you think, okay, I want to make it as perfect as I can, but it'll never be as perfect as I want it to be. And because it'll never be as perfect as I want it to be, I won't do it. And that's put me into some pretty tight situations before. For example, for my university thesis, I managed to complete that in 3 days with the help of two friends, kind of pulling two all-nighters to try put that together because even though I had 6 months to work on it and I was actually not taking any classes at that time because I had already finished class requirements, I had an idea of what perfect would be, and that held me back from doing anything. And so that ended up with a 3 day crunch time. I ended up with a product that I was not necessarily proud of. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that the item that I wanted to create, and even though I could visualize what perfection would be, it would never actually get to that level. And so one thing that I need to remind myself is that it will never be perfect in the way that I might imagine. However, it's also important to get it done. And this ties directly into my essay, but this also ties into things at work. So, for example, if you're a new product manager, one of the things that you're going to need to work on is a product requirement document or PRD. And a product requirement document is either a Confluence page or Notion page or some doc that you have where you're going to capture the stakeholders, capture the requirements, and share that with your engineers. Now, when I say share with your engineers, it's very much ideally a collaborative effort, but it depends on your company or how you guys work. But generally, to create a PRD is one of the base skills that a entry level product manager should have when they're joining a new company, because they're going to have to address the situation, acknowledge maybe what needs to be made, what solutions need to be implemented, or there's already an existing backlog and you want to figure out, okay, how do we action on this backlog? And so you're going to have to start creating these documents quite regularly. Now, that's where perfectionism sometimes gets me in trouble, is because I picture, oh, I'm gonna make this and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be incredible. It's gonna be a product requirement document that has all the stakeholders, all the teams that are involved. It's gonna list, every possible screen that it's gonna have, and it'll be the comprehensive document that I need for this feature. However, PRDs aren't supposed to be like tomes. They're supposed to be documents that you make and you share with stakeholders and you share with your team and you review and then you iterate on. And you can't do that if you're scared to share it, right? And if you are waiting for the product to be perfect or for the document to be perfect before you consider it to be done, then it'll never be perfect or it'll barely be good. And so my recommendation is, and this is something that I tell myself all the time, is good is better than done. And this is something that my wife is also really supportive in telling me. She's like, look, you have something big, break it down and make it into small iterative steps. And each of those steps can be perfect, right? You can think, what's the perfect version of this step? And you can keep tinkering, but at least then you're making progress. But if you have a really big idea of like this is perfect, you're never actually going to get there. Or at least that's what you tell yourself. And then because you tell yourself that, you don't actually do anything, which makes the chance of getting there absolutely zero. And so I try to remind myself almost every day that good is better than done, because if it's good and I can share it, then, oh, Sorry, done is better than perfect. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I wrote that wrong. Done is better than perfect because if it's finished to the degree that I can at least share it and get the point across, then it's set. It might not be, what I have in mind, but it's achieving the role that it's supposed to do. So, number one, accept it'll never be perfect. Number two, done is better than perfect. And that's something that I need to remind myself all the time. And one way to overcome the done is better than perfect is to, like I said earlier, break down what does done mean. So you make done into specific paragraphs. I've become more comfortable with sharing rough drafts of what I work on. When I first joined Mercari, I would be given assignments and I'd be like, okay, let me work on it. Let me work on it. 1 month later, it's like, Jason, where's the document? We gave it to you a month ago. And I was like, oh, well, this is what I had so far, which was already quite comprehensive, but it was maybe not in the direction that the stakeholders were anticipating. And so that's one of my recommendations, actually share the rough draft and share it early. The first version of the rough draft will be shared with your engineers and with your designers so that you can show what you're thinking about, right? And you can get that point across. Then the second round, after you've iterated with your team, would be, hey, maybe the immediate stakeholders to say, this is the idea that we're going in. And then lastly would be to make it more widely available. And in doing so, you become less concerned about perfect because you're aware that the document is achieving its purpose. And that's ultimately the number one goal. So personally, I struggle with this all the time. And, don't get hung up if you do, but I'd like write it down somewhere that done is better than perfect. And don't be scared to share your first draft. It's recently I've been trying to think, why do I experience perfectionism, right? And there is a clinical or there's a serious version of perfectionism, and there's just like, oh, but I want it to be perfect. And so I'm psyching myself out. And I'm more the latter. I don't think I qualify for like it must be, but there is a certain fear with presenting work that feels incomplete. And there's a certain fear about putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable, going, but I haven't made it to the degree that I want to. And so people are going to judge me because it's not finished or because it's not as good as it can be. And I've noticed that's all in our heads because the person that sees it, they have the same problem. They have the same fears. And so they understand that you're scared. They understand that you're nervous, but we're all working together and we're all working as a team. And so acknowledging that the other people that are going to see it are also human. And yes, they might have comments. Yes, they might poke holes in the thing that you've made, but that's in an effort to make it better, not in an effort to tear you down. And if it's in an effort to tear you down, then you're in the wrong. And so I would recommend, like I said, accept it'll never be perfect. Remind yourself that done is better than perfect. And the strongest thing to do that is to share the rough draft with people in your team. And in doing so, you slowly start to break away this idea of, but it needs to be perfect before it can do its job. Because it can do its job when it's half baked. But ideally, by sharing it with the team, you can tinker on it and make it even better. All right. I just wanted to share that. If you find that this is helpful, then please do let me know in the comments below or subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next one.